In our work where we use casting and gloss wax casting, we approach our sculpting in a lot of cases more like a fabricator, working with existing extrusions, shapes, parts, and combining them. Frequently, we're doing one-offs. We're sculpting originals in wax, much like a jeweler would, because the specific parts or what we need is such a small run, or it's so unique that we're just looking to do that part. So we try to work with any shapes that are out there that are usable. One of my favorites that is a very low cost is sprue wax. Sprue wax is designed for putting the vents and gates when the foundry invests the object that you send them, so that the molten bronze can be poured in and air can get out. It is available in square, round, I believe it's a 24 or 30 inch length, a whole range of sizes. It's pretty inexpensive, and unlike the other red wax, this one's quite malleable. You can bend it into a lot of different shapes and use it actually as a sculpting tool in and of itself. If you want to get more precise, a lot of these shapes are available from the jeweler's supply. These are rated, this is a modeler's wax. It's rectangular, it's considered 2 gauge, it's a very thin ribbon. It's designed for making bezels on rings or different wire gauge. This is rated at an 8 gauge, and I assume that it accounts for the shrinkage. All of these modeler's waxes are very malleable. They can be formed, joined, cut, all sorts of different sizes. They're also available as some extrusions. These are generally made for making rings. So it's a short cylinder that comes at a very specific ID and an OD. It can be cut into rings. If you heat it up in hot water or something, you can mash it into oval. You can carve into it. You can cut pieces out of it. Like most waxes, there's a lot you can do. It is much more expensive because you're talking about precision over working with the sprue wax. There's another wax that we've started using frequently, and it's called a pattern maker's wax. And this wax comes in a 12 by 24 sheet. It has an application in pattern making for sand cast patterns, but we're actually using it as a sculpting tool. I love this material. It is very expensive. It goes up to about 1/4 inch thick, down to extremely thin. This is an 030. It is available with or without an adhesive backing, and the adhesive is pretty useful for joining pieces. But as you can see, it's quite malleable. It also has the ability to be cut very easily with an X-Acto knife, and there's all sorts of things you can do with it. So if you're going to do a lot of wax work, there's some basic tools that you really do need. One is a good wax pot. These are deep fryers, and you need to look around. I absolutely love these because they've got a great temperature control on them. And most of the time, your temperature is going to be right around 200 to 250 on the wax, and you really want to keep it low. You do have the danger of a flash fire overheating wax, which is why you should be working under a hood or outside. We keep 2 pots going most of the time, one with a brown wax and one with a red casting wax. And of course, you can do those mixes in any way you like. We also keep an electric skillet, or I've seen a lot of art foundries use flat electric griddles. One thing is that you can keep your metal tools in it and keep them warm, which makes it easier to actually work on the pieces you are. We also keep a couple of these little cream servers from the restaurant supply. These are great because you want to be able to dip out various quantities for pouring. They've got a great spout on them. You can also heat them up with a torch. The other item you really kind of need is a little propane torch. I do want to caution you that the wax is a fuel, and overheating it, you can cause a flash fire and burn things. And the other is a soldering iron. Soldering irons are almost indispensable because you can use them for melting, texturing, cutting, just a variety of things. As I said before, we use a kitchen hood inside and try to work underneath it. Otherwise, you really should be working outside, or in a lot of cases, with a respirator. In a lot of times with the forming and sculpting that you're doing, you're going to want to join various pieces of wax together. If they are of the same consistency, the same mix, and they're very soft, a lot of times you can join them just like you would clay by molding them together. Remember, wax is temperature sensitive. But in a lot of cases, you're joining waxes of different hardness, such as the sprue wax to this, which does not really work very readily. You can get a little bit of a bond, but not enough. For that, we use what's called sticky wax or glue wax. This comes in a small pellet, and it's largely a lot of pine pitch, and you need to apply heat to actually make these little connections. One of the most common tools that we use in sculpting and forming is a soldering iron. And using the sticky wax, you can also keep a pot of molten sticky wax to dip these things into and bond with. As with any of the wax that you're working on, it goes through a molten phase, and you need a way to brace it until it cools and holds the form or position that you want. I'm not running the hood behind me right now because of the sound, but in this room that we do our wax in, we have a basic kitchen hood vented to the outside, which I'm usually running and trying to keep most of our soldering iron work underneath the hood so that you're not breathing much of this. So a couple of ways for using the sprue wax is either using the granules and melting it with a soldering iron to attach your pieces to it, which sometimes works great. You do have to be able to support this piece while the wax cools, so it's good if you rig up some blocks or something to hold that. Another way is I try to keep a small trivet that I heat periodically with a torch and just keep a little bit of the sticky wax in there that's melted. You can kind of, I mean, you're basically kind of using it like hot glue, but you can dip this in and basically that'll attach pretty readily on pieces. You know, your creativity is really kind of unlimited in how you really go about attaching pieces. There's a lot of similarities to clay, but it is a little bit different. And of course, you got to let all these pieces cool in between. When working with the red wax to actually pour molds, a lot of times you'll want to smooth out the surface or fill air bubbles or pits. There's a product called patch wax. These are available from a vendor, which we can talk about later. The patch wax is about the same consistency as Crisco, as vegetable oil. It's malleable, it melts very quickly under your skin temperature. But because of that, you can use it to fill small holes very easily and the heat of your finger to smooth pieces out. It can be used to create a smoother texture and to fill pits. So these cast pieces from our Jenner mirror, we have some air bubbles in the castings just because of the way that it was poured. And I'm going to use the patch wax to just fill these up. You can use your finger or a putty knife or whatever and just kind of smooth it in. It's very easy to bring back the contour. You can also go ahead and use some wire brushes or other tools to bring back any texture at this point in time.